Hey guys, it's Ben here with the Half Court Heave podcast. I'm here with Arjun as he couldn't make it today. We got a lot to talk about today. We've had the NBA offseason is basically done. Anthony Davis still hasn't signed anywhere, but we know where he's going. And other than that, there's not really much left in the free agency. So we can basically just go straight into it and talk about reflecting over this offseason that we really haven't covered much until now. But before we get into the action, I do want to talk about our merch and say that it's cheap, it's comfortable. The winter is coming up. It's about to get real cold. It's not real cold where we are yet, but you're gonna want to get a hoodie. You're gonna want to get a beanie.
I mean, like I don't have it on me right now, but whew. I mean, if I'm ordering a hoodie right now, look, guys, just it's not that expensive. It's really cheap. Just please get your merch. It would really help us out. And I mean, who doesn't want our merch?
Yeah, and then obviously before we get into it, go ahead and like and subscribe so we can keep on putting out more content for you guys. And share this with a friend, they need to know how based I am, obviously. But also, if you're coming here from the Instagram and you want to look for topics that were listed on the Instagram, there's the times next to them. Click the time. You can go to that topic. It's in the description. Same with the link to our merch. But anyways, let's get into our first topic we want to talk about today, which is who was the most overpaid player this offseason, Arshun?
All right, I've got two guys, and there have been a lot of moves made this offseason. The Clippers, the first guy, the Clippers re-signed Marcus Morris Sr. to a 106 to a 16 mil year, a 16 mil per year. My bad, I slipped up. But he averaged about 12 points per game on the worst. He had the worst defensive rating in his career. He just really isn't worth 16 mil for the Clippers because you see him as like somewhat of a scoring punch. You don't see him as like a key piece on your team because you already have a bunch of key pieces on your team. Zubac is a defensive staple. You've got obviously Kawhi, PG. But my second guy, and Ben, I know you're going to take this personally.
Oh, no.
Gordon Hayward. Because you cannot be giving this man 30 mil after what happened, after what he did to this, after what the injury, after everything that's happened. You cannot tell me that he's still worth a max.
Okay,
because
no,
in my mind,
no. No. You've gotten me angry on the first minute of you talking, and I knew you were going to do this. I know a lot of people are saying this. A lot of people are saying, the Swarm and the Sting, which is probably the most obnoxious and terrible website for reading articles about the Charlotte Hornets or really any sports thing. It's a disgrace of a website, and those writers need to be fired. But they said it's the worst signing in NBA history, and that's just wrong. This signing, while he was overpaid, the contract was not to his true value. I can give you that. But was the contract so bad that you could call it the worst signing this offseason? No. Because, he got $30 million. But it's a guy who averaged 18 points per game on efficient shooting, a guy who's a great playmaker, and he's doing that and as the fourth option on the Celtics, behind three very good scorers. He's not behind three average guys. He's behind three of guys that I would want to be behind if I was a fourth scoring option. But you take this guy Gordon Hayward and you put him on the Hornets, and you can get Utah Jazz Gordon Hayward again. People are acting like he's completely different after the injury. While last season, this is his second season after he's had that terrible injury against the Cavs in his first season with the Celtics, and he's put up 18 points per game with 5 assists on efficient shooting. Gordon Hayward is very good, and yes, I know you think that it's overpaid, but I think he's around $20 million player, like that range. And also, the main reason that I think he wasn't overpaid before I get into my most overpaid players was that you're paying him a max contract in hopes that he's a max contract player. Like you said, Marcus Morris, you're paying him $16 million to be a bench player, and that doesn't make sense. We're paying the Hornets, they're paying Gordon Hayward that money in hopes that he's a max contract player.
There's a reason they're paying him that word, money. In hopes, which is probably not going to happen, but carry on.
And you put him on this team where LaMelo Ball, obviously you want to get as much help for LaMelo Ball as possible to make that playoff push, since they're right about that 9 range, and they need that punch to get really into the clear 8 spot. And I think that Gordon Hayward really puts them in that fight where they would be lacking behind guys like the Hawks and the Wizards. But I do think that they needed to do this signing. I think it would have been smarter to just go with Miles Bridges, maybe get a lower draft pick, but it's not a terrible signing. But you talk about bad signings and signing them for bad roles. You talk about Danilo Gallinari. That was probably my worst signing this offseason, as they paid him $20 million a year, 3 years, $60 million to be a bench player. Which that's the biggest thing when I went through and looked at all these contracts on grading is like my second biggest contract, the second worst contract to me was Jeremy Grant. They paid him 20 mil a year in Detroit, and he was averaging like 12 points and 3 rebounds on decent shooting. But they paid him in hopes that he's worth $20 million. For the Hawks, they're literally paying a bench player $20 million because they want him to be a bench player, and that really doesn't make sense to me. But the fact that you would say that Gordon Hayward was the worst signing or the most overpaid player is kind of ridiculous to me, where, yeah, he made the most money this offseason, but I don't think he was the most overpaid player.
Okay, so I'm not going to say that it's one of the worst signings in history. Do I think it's the worst signing? I think it is. And the reason why it is because, Ben, Gordon Hayward averaged 17 on that Celtics team as the fourth option. I am aware of that. But this is also a team that pretty much had I think they had the best starting lineup in terms of scoring out of the entire NBA. I mean, there was very little bench scoring at all on the Celtics team. And you had Brad Wanamaker coming off the bench, who probably gave you the most amount of scoring. Marcus Smart averaging, like, as much as I love Marcus Smart, averaging like 10 points and like 37% shooting. But I mean, when you put him in Charlotte, you pay a guy 30 mil to give you max performance. And the way I see max performance is to be that guy, the number one option. Is Gordon Hayward going to be the number one option in Charlotte? No, he's not going to be the number one option, because the number one option is going to be LaMelo Ball. He's the guy that's going to be like facilitating.
No. He's going to be the first scoring option. LaMelo Ball is going to be the guy who takes the ball up, and he's going to be the guy who decides where the ball goes. But primarily, the first scoring option, the first guy that LaMelo Ball wants to patch to is Gordon Hayward. There's a reason they paid him that money, was to be a max contract player. And of course, I think he's worth around 20, 25 mil. But like, also, I think the biggest thing was Charlotte didn't overpay him. Everyone overpaid him that went for him. You look at your Boston Celtics, they offered him 30 mil again. Like, the market was just about the same. The Celtics and the Pacers offered him 10 mil less than the Hornets did, and the Knicks offered him 10 mil more. I mean, it's not like the Hornets were out of nowhere paying a guy who's going to get 4 years, 80 million, 4 years, 120 million. I mean, they paid the guy what the market was, and they got the guy they wanted. And I don't agree with the signing 100% necessarily. I think he should have stuck with the young core, but I think it's not the worst signing when it comes to that. And I think that it really is going to prove beneficial to the Hornets, since they get a guy who, yeah, there wasn't a lot of bench scoring on the Celtics, but he was behind 4 prolific scorers, like these guys that aren't primary playmakers. Kemba has been a career-long scorer in Charlotte. You look at Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they're primary slashers, finishers. They want to get to the basket. They don't look to pass. Like, Gordon Hayward was not suffering, but he was getting the fourth option while he knew he could be a first option on a playoff team, and that's what he gets in the Charlotte Hornets.
All right, so yeah, I'm with that idea, but I'm gonna quickly give my take on the Hayward and Celtics situation, because I honestly think it was due time before Hayward left the Celtics. He probably should not have re-signed them at all, because it's what's best for your career. I mean, do I think he's going to be the same? He's the same after his injury. I mean, who knows? He could be. He could like go back to that high level of scoring. But do I? I mean, well, during the beginning of the season, I didn't want them to trade. I didn't want the Celtics to trade Hayward. When you actually when I looked into it, they probably should. They should have traded him. But the point is that when you have a guy like Devontae Graham, he averaged like a hell of a lot of points, almost 20 points a game. He's going to want to get a lot of points. He's going to make the next step. He's going to get a lot of points. I mean, LaMelo Ball is like, I think he's going to be the first option for these Charlotte Hornets. Do I think Gordon Hayward is going to reach that point where he is going to put up stats? He's going to put up stats that's going to make him worth that 30 mil. He is just not going to do that. And I just think that he's not going to happen.
He's obviously, I completely agree with you. He's never going to be worth $30 million. That's not his primary worth. But overpaying him $10 million in hopes that he could be your number one option. Now, LaMelo Ball, he's a primary passer. That's why he's the first option, meaning he's the first one to get the ball, and he decides where the ball goes. The positioning, playoff positioning, and seeding of the Charlotte Hornets completely goes down to LaMelo Ball and how he performs. So that's a whole different thing to talk about. But Gordon Hayward is going to average the most points. He's going to shoot the most shots, because that's why they paid him to be there. They wouldn't pay him 30 mil to be a second or third option behind Devontae Graham and LaMelo Ball. That would just be plain stupid with no context. Like, some people just think this signing's plain stupid, but at least there's context to it. But anyways, there is one more thing I do want to talk about. Well, the next thing I want to talk about, which is the Philadelphia 76ers. And that is, with all of their new additions this offseason that Daryl Morey has made, are the 76ers contenders or pretenders, Arshum? What do you think?
Ooh. All right. The 76ers, I'm going to go with, I think that they are going to be pretenders for this season. This specific upcoming season, I don't think they're going to match the firepower that the other teams this season have. As much as people want to call this Miami run a fluke, which it may be a fluke, I mean, in my mind, it's sort of what it's not going to happen again, but it was a great run. But they're going to be a great regular season team. They're going to be a contending team in the East. Are the Celtics going to be a contending team? Maybe that's a little bias showing for me, but I think they're going to be a contending team. Are the Nets going to contend? Yes. Are the Bucks going to contend? Yes. So when I see the playoff picture, the 76ers are maybe the fifth seed at best for me. They have a great team, but they've just never made that push. If you give them a guy like Seth Curry that's going in the right direction, but they're not at the point where they're used to be, where they're legitimate contenders, this East is far too advanced for them, and they're just not. I just don't see their roster a
No,
contending.
no, that's where I disagree with you. Is that there's a lot of firepower in this East. As much as people want to talk about the West and how great the West is, I don't think people are talking about how great the East is truly when it comes to depth, especially when it comes to the top playoff teams. I think there's 7 playoff locks right now. There's that one playoff spot, but I think that's the next thing we talk about. But before that, I think that when you look at 2017, 2018, that Sixers team, they had Rocco, they had Jaric, I think they had Landry Shamet, and that was his rookie year. They had a great bench. They had a great starting lineup. They had that rookie Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, and they won 52 games, even with Brett Brown as their coach. That team had a lot of future. That's why the next year people were thinking they're going to be the 1 seed. And then Elton Brand, mid next season, trades Covington and Jaric, I don't know how to fully pronounce his name, for Jimmy Butler. And then Elton Brand traded Mike Muscala, Landry Shamet, and I think Wilson Chandler, and then multiple first round picks for Tobias Harris, and then traded, of course, Markelle Fultz for, I think, who was it, Jonathan Simmons. And then, of course, they still won 51 games, and then they went down, and then they lost in the Eastern Conference semifinals, but they lost in a Game 7 on probably the luckiest shot in sports history. I mean, this team was 1 shot away from the Eastern Conference Finals, where I bet they would have made it to the finals. And then if they made it to the finals, playing that same team that the Kawhi Raptors did, they sure as hell would have won that finals. And then they would be the reigning champions the next season. But then, of course, they went on. They let Jimmy Butler walk and sign and traded him for Josh Richardson, primarily trading Robert Covington and Dario for Josh Richardson, which was ridiculous. And then signing with the Jimmy Butler money, Al Horford, and then Tobias Harris to a max contract, which was ridiculous, beyond ridiculous. And then, of course, now Daryl Morey has come in after they won 43 games last season. He started turning them back into that 52 win season that they had in 2017, 2018. They traded for Danny Green. They traded for Seth Curry. And I think this team is a contender now. I mean, you have the shooters around them. All we've been saying since they started trading away all their depth is they need depth and they need scoring, and this team will win a championship as long as Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid continue to mesh together well, and they have. Then now he's getting Seth Curry for Josh Richardson, which was an amazing deal. They basically fleeced him, in my opinion. And then you go ahead and you get Danny Green, where as much as people love to make jokes about Danny Green, he's one hell of a shooter, and he will definitely help this team in the long run, especially in the playoffs, as much as we like to hate about him. And then signed Dwight Howard to be your bench center. Talk about depth. He's a great bench center. And then you drafted Tyrese Maxey, who will be a great bench piece. And this team has gone the right trajectory. And for this next season, I'm not shy to call them contenders as long as everything goes as planned. And now they have Doc Rivers as their head coach instead of Brett Brown. But when it comes to contending, I think they're better than the Celtics. I think they're better than the Raptors. I don't think there's like a huge difference between them. I think they're better than them if they mesh well. But Arjun, what do you think?
Ben, you just said, I want to go back to something earlier. The fact that you said that Philadelphia team with Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons, and Joel Embiid would have easily beat the Golden State Warriors in the finals. First of all, don't discredit Kawhi because of that finals run. That was a great finals run. They still had to face Klay Thompson and Steph Curry-led Warriors. They only were missing KD, and they're already still a broken team. Broken as in they're just like unstoppable offensive team. But first of all, The Sixers, I think they're going to have a good regular season. If you're asking me, are they going to be contenders this season? I don't think they're going to be contenders this season, and that's because it's the obvious statement that they just have had such a poor playoff performances in the past couple of years. I mean, besides the last year thing, they almost beat the Raptors, and that was a Game 7 series, and they ended up losing. So that's that. But they can. I mean, in 2018 they got swept by the Celtics, or I mean they maybe won one game, but they just have always been one step away. And I just don't think those roster changes have made an. You can't see that those roster changes have made it a 1 year immediate impact.
I mean,
Year.
no, you're talking about their 5 game series against the Celtics, acting like this team hasn't developed. Those two stars haven't developed. Of course, everything around them is different now. But I mean, now you have Tobias Harris, who's still a good player. I hope they had traded his contract for more shooters, but they didn't. And he led the NBA in minutes last season. He put up a lot of production for that team. And then you
look
at Steph Curry.
I'm saying that they have good players on their team, but they're just not. I don't think they're going to mesh well in this 1 year. And maybe in like 2 or 3 years, but I just don't see them being better than the Celtics in the playoffs. And we're talking about contending for a championship. I just don't see them being better than the Celtics, being better than the Heat.
We're not gonna sit here and act like the Celtics are some great playoff team. When's the last this team hasn't made it to the finals yet? They've gotten bounced out every time they've had a chance.
Well, that's just because they've been one piece away. The Celtics have made the conference finals 3 out of the last 4 years. I mean, they've always fallen short, but I mean they've made progress. I mean, it's the fact that the 76ers have never actually scratched that surface. They haven't gotten into that conference finals. They haven't gotten to that.
No. But when you look at that Raptors series, they were the better team than the Raptors. You can't say that Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons, and Joel Embiid playing good basketball isn't better.
That was a great roster. I'm not saying that they weren't, but I mean that's the truth that they should have kept. And guess what? They didn't. We're not talking about their roster. We're talking about the current roster right now.
The current roster right now is better than that roster.
I think
the current roster is better than that roster.
No, they are not. They're not better than that roster.
Yes,
you're talking chemistry-wise. That's the only thing you have up on that.
You have shooting. You have depth. You have Dwight Howard off the bench coming off for Joel Embiid. I mean, Joel Embiid has to miss a couple games. You have Dwight Howard, who's still a very productive center in the NBA.
They've made changes to your team. I'm not disagreeing that they've gone in the positive way, but in 1 year, that roster isn't going to be an immediately contending team.
They went from the last season was the worst this team has been since the process was officially going. Like, instead of winning 28 games like they did the year before their 58 for their 52 win season, was when the process started going up. This team has gotten better. The two stars have gotten better every year, and this team now is probably the best roster besides that 2017-2018 when it comes to depth and shooting. I think it's actually a better roster besides that, and I think that Ben Simmons has gotten better. I think that jump shot is going to prove itself. He was shooting a lot. He was shooting very well in the bubble before he got injured. He was letting the threes fly like it was nothing. He was finally shooting those. Now he has Doc Rivers. Now he has a competent coaching staff, and this team will certainly compete in the East. Now that the Raptors, they lost Serge Ibaka, and I don't know about their future when it comes to winning in the East after all the losses that they've had in the free agency. And then you look at the Celtics, they lost Gordon Hayward, replaced him with Tristan Thompson, a big who's going to clog the lane when their two best players are finishers. I mean, that wasn't a great signing. Jeff Teague's not better than Brad Wanamaker. I think that both those teams are not.
Jeff Teague, wait. First of all, Jeff Teague is a massive upgrade to Brad Wanamaker because he brings the veteran. They both have somewhat veteran leadership, but at least Jeff Teague knows a thing or two about scoring and keeping the ball to himself.
You don't need scoring, you need defense. And you know what Brad Wanamaker brought off the bench? Defense. And you lost the guy who brought you defense. You bring in like a 50-year-old Jeff Teague. I know I'm joking, but
Ben, that's not the point. They needed bench scoring, not bench defense. This is a great defensive team. I think the Celtics did make upgrades, and those teams did make upgrades.
The Celtics lost a lot this offseason.
What could have been, Ben, one second. What could have been with the Miles Turner thing? They could have gotten Miles Turner, but if you look at it overall, they still have Enes Kanter. They still have Daniel Tice.
No, they don't. They traded Dennis Kanter.
Yeah, that's my fault. But they still have Daniel Tice. They still have good depth in the center. They have Robert Williams. So really, if you look at it from last year to this year, they do have an improved roster, and so do many other
They
teams.
don't
You can't
know.
say the
I
Sixers
mean, you
don't
can't say that
improve.
this team improved from 2 months ago, but anyways, I do want to talk about something else. And let's talk about that final playoff spot in the East. We did talk about how there's 7 teams that are locked in. Those including, I'll include the Pacers until they make moves because we're not certain they're going to make moves. But until then, they're locked. And there's one playoff spot, and I would say the teams in contention are the Wizards, the Hawks, and the Hornets. And I can't consider the Magic in there, but maybe you can. But Arjun, what do you think?
Okay. I think that the Hornets are going to be in the playoffs barely. But if you want me to say the final playoff spot, I'm gonna have to go with, if it's between the Hawks or the Wizards or the Magic, I'm gonna go with the Hawks because as much as you want to slander Trey Young,
Wait,
is
wait,
he
wait, wait, wait. You said the Hornets in the 7th seed in this scenario?
yes.
Oh, so the Pacers fall out.
No, the Pacers are still a 6th seed.
Who falls out?
The team, no one falls out.
Wait, what's your playoff then? Wait,
Okay,
wait.
okay. The Bucks, the Nets, the Celtics. I mean, the Bucks, the Nets, the Celtics, or Heat. You could. I mean, I don't know how it's gonna be. So the Heat at 4, the 76ers, the Pacers, the Hornets, and then I'm gonna go with the Hawks.
Is that not? Anyways, I'm tripping. No, there's one playoff spot left in the East with the Pacers in. But anyways, yeah, just say who's your
Okay,
final
I'm
playoff.
gonna go with the yeah. I'll still say that the final playoff spot is gonna go to the Hawks because as much as you want to slander Trey Young's defense, as much as you want to slander his inefficiency, and he is a little bit inefficient, not as inefficient as you make it seem, but he does have subpar perimeter defense. But if you look at the team as a whole, this is their first time they haven't gotten to utilize Capella. I do think there will be a problem in the spacing, but you still have an explosive young Collins. I mean, Capella can play like 40 minutes. He's a terrific defensive player, will give you rebounding and somewhat scoring. But I mean, you've got Bogdanovich, you've got Danilo Gallinari. The contract wasn't great, but you've got increased scoring. So this team, I think, is going to go from, I think they're bottom in the East. They're going to go high. And then DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish, don't forget about these guys. This can be a team, this could be a potential contender in the near future. I say that this team is one of the best young teams in the NBA. I
Okay.
mean, they have so many offensive weapons and defensive weapons like DeAndre Hunter on their team. So they definitely are going to be in the final playoff spot.
I can't agree with that. I think you're forgetting the fact that they were at the bottom of the East. Like this team, they added Gallinari off the bench. They added Onyeka Okongwu, another forward, off the bench. They added Chris Dunn. He's not that great. I mean, like Rajon Rondo, he'll be great in the playoffs, but regular season, is he that great of an improvement from Kevin Herter or whoever they had backup point guard last season? I mean, he
Yeah,
is,
I
but
think
like,
he
but
is.
is
He
he
is a
is he
great
that
regular
much? Is he that
solid
much to get you to that
player.
playoff spot? I mean, I don't see that team making that much of a jump compared to the Washington Wizards, who have John Wall and Bradley Beal and Davis Bertans and Denny, and I'm not even going to say his last name, Denny, and then you have, of course, the weak spot, Thomas Bryant at center, but that team is a very, very talented team. You have Rui off the bench. Rui's a very talented guy. They've been calling him the next Kawhi, which is, of course, ridiculous, but I don't think that I can call that Hawks team better than the Wizards team. I don't know if I can call them better than the Hornets. They can't be better than the Pacers. They can't, and I'd say that they're definitely better than the Magic, but other than that, I don't see them making that final playoff spot. I don't think Bogdanovich gives them that final
But
jump over these teams that have already improved more than they have this offseason.
you can't be serious when you're telling me that the Wizards have a better chance of making the playoffs than the Hawks. The Wizards literally, I mean, we don't even know if John Wall is going to be the same. If John Wall is going to be another. He's not. I don't think he's going to be like. I honestly think that this injury, the injuries he's had, I honestly don't think he's going to be the same. I think
I
he's
mean,
going
but
to
you
be
can't just
an
you
18
can't
point
just
per game
assume
scorer.
that he's
But
not going to
I know
be.
I can't assume that. But I'm also taking the Wizards team. I mean, the Hornets. I mean, not the Hornets. The Hawks. They may have some overload in some positions, but they've got so much talent, so much raw talent. And you can't tell me that Thomas Bryant at center. You can't tell me that this Wizards team. I mean, they have Davis Bertans, but they're just not. You can't compare. You can't say the Hawks are just not going to be as good as the Wizards because of last year. I mean,
I
last
think you
year,
forgot who John Wall is. John Wall, if John Wall is healthy and playing like John Wall usually does, I'm taking John Wall over Trey Young. I'm taking Bradley Beal
yeah,
over Trey Young. These are two guys already better than the star centerpiece of this offense on the Hawks. And I mean, he was
I
the
mean, he's a second-year player, though. He's going to get better
and
over
he's
time. But
statistically the
already right
worst
now,
defender in the NBA last season. When you look at that, you just have to incorporate the fact that I mean, you get John Wall back, who was their starting point guard last year. Ish Smith, he's not worth it. You get Denny, who was supposed to be the fourth pick of the draft, fell to them at 9. You have Davis Bertans, who I don't think you're remembering how good of a sharpshooter that man is, the Latvian laser. He shot 40% from 3 as the 4, and then you have maybe you have Rui or Denny off the bench, and then you have Thomas Bryant at the center, who's, I mean, he's not great, but he's not terrible. I mean, and then you compare that to the Hawks, I mean, you have Trae Young's defensive misses, and then you have Kevin Huerter. You still have that same backcourt. When that starting backcourt is out there, easy buckets for anybody on the perimeter. Kevin Huerter and Trae Young, anybody's getting easy buckets on that team. And I mean, you said DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish. It's great depth, but great depth isn't better than John Wall and Bradley Beal and Davis Bertans.
You don't know if John Wall is going to be the same. I mean,
I'm not just going to assume he's going to be bad, though. I'm not going to assume he's going to be bad. Of course, I'm not
saying that he's going to bad. I'm going to say that he's not going to have the same athleticism. He's not going to be as good of a weapon. I don't know. He could be. I'm
assuming John Wall is the same John Wall we saw before until he proves me different. And I have them and the Hornets being the top contenders for that 8th spot. I think that the only spot left is the 8th spot, and then they'll be competing for that final spot. And I don't really see, I mean, of course I see a debate for the Hawks, but I see them as probably the 10 seed next season. I mean, and that's great improvement for them. They are on the uprise. They are a future contender with Trae Young as long as they get a defender back there. If they had gotten Drew Holiday back there with him, or somebody who's a great defensive guard, maybe even Marcus Smart, I would have definitely said they would have gotten that playoff spot. But with how bad that perimeter defense is, and signing really pointless signings like Danilo Gallinari, paying him $20 million to come off the bench, I can't put them in the final playoff spot over the teams like the Wizards and the Hornets.
Man,
I think it easily goes to them.
We're not projecting them to go make a deep run in the playoffs. I mean, I know that. I don't care if they have subpar perimeter defense, honestly. I mean, they've upgraded their scoring so much that it's gotten to a point where, I mean, I don't care how bad their perimeter defense is, they're still going to be such a great scoring.
It's their bench scoring. I mean, their starting lineup didn't get any better. I mean, their bench was already decent. Improving your bench that much isn't that great of an upgrade. I mean, the bench is the bench. It's going to help you a lot if you're
the problem. That's the problem with the Hawks. The Hawks didn't have a good bench to rely on. They had to play Trae Young 40 minutes. They had to rely on John Collins, who was suspended for so long. This upgrade of the bench is going to be a big deal for them.
Next thing I do want to talk about is what is the ceiling for the Mavericks next season? Actually, I'll start this one off. I think the ceiling is the roof for the Mavericks next season. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that I think people are underestimating the fact that people are saying that, they're the same defensive team they were the season before, and they won't have that much improvement because they didn't improve on defense, and they were a pretty bad defensive team the year before. But I think their ceiling is probably the 4 or the 5 seed next year. They were the 7 seed this previous season, and I think people have forgotten that just because Luka put up 30, 10, and 10, he can still get better. He was a second-year player. Just because he put up such dominant stats doesn't mean he can't put up even more dominant stats in the next year. He's still going to improve, and Kristaps Porzingis is still going to improve because he's still young. People forget he was an all-star when he was in New York, but I think this team's ceiling is probably a 4 or 5 seed. I don't see them being better than the Nuggets, the Clippers, or the Lakers next regular season. I don't know what they can do in the playoffs, but Luka's pretty filthy in the playoffs. But Arshun, what do you think?
I'm right around where you are, but I think that I think that this team could potentially be a 3 seed. That's their ceiling. So this is the ceiling we're talking about. I don't think that they're going to be a 3 seed, but potentially looking at this team, they have a great coach. Rick Carlisle is a great coach, a great owner. I mean, we all know about Mark Cuban, what he's done before. He's a great owner, and they have the best young duo in the NBA, obviously above Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. And I mean, as much as we want to criticize their overall defense, I mean, Dorian Finney-Smith, Tim Hardaway Jr., Maxi Kleber, they're pretty solid players. They're good offensive players. They have good supporting units around them. So I'm seeing that if Luka, when I say the ceiling, I mean Luka goes absolutely berserker. He becomes the unanimous MVP. I mean, Kristaps has a dominant season. He just absolutely elevates his scoring game and his and it's just over in his defense. That's the ceiling. This team at their ceiling is better than I mean either the Clippers or the Nuggets in the regular season. In the regular season,
Yeah,
with
I
their
mean,
play style, I mean,
I generally agree with you. Like Luca generally, yeah, as I said before, people don't think that Luca can improve that much because he's doing such numbers. Like Luca could fuck around and be one of the greatest players of all time after at the end of his career. People don't really realize that, but I think he could really put up like 40 points per game if he really reached his peak development, and he has a lot of potential. But I do think their ceiling is the 4 or the 5 spot because I don't think they improved enough on defense. And I really didn't like that Josh Richardson trade since they gave away a great shooter and didn't really get back the defense they wanted. I wish they had gotten Marcus Smart. That would have been great for them. And I know that the Celtics,
Ben, also look at the fact
are
that
dropping them.
this team didn't even have Kristaps and they still forced a game 6 against the Clippers. This Clippers team, as much as much of a choke job they had against the Nuggets, they were up 3-1 against the Nuggets. And it was at a point where I mean Luka was just putting this team on his back, and it was so
That's the thing is like when they get into the playoffs, there's no ceiling for this team. Like in the playoffs, if they have a healthy team, Luca can fuck around and win the NBA Finals because that's what I mean. Luca proved that against the Clippers because the Clippers were still playing good basketball and Luca was doing that shit himself. But anyways, there is the next thing I do want to talk about is in football and is it time for the Cowboys to blow it up and rebuild? Arjun, what do you think?
all right. Dallas Cowboys. Before we get into that, I want to look at the conference right now. There are two teams. The New York Giants, as bad as Daniel Jones is, look, showing a little sign of improvement. He's showing signs of improvement. The Washington football team, I mean, Antonio Gibson had an insane game. So both those teams have a lot of young talent. And you look at the Dallas Cowboys and also the Philadelphia Eagles, both those teams are expected to do really well this season. They're expected to be top of that season. That didn't really happen. Now, the Dallas Cowboys have two massive problems with their financial. They have two massive financial problems, and they overpay Dak Prescott and they overpay Ezekiel Elliott.
They didn't.
I mean,
they didn't pay Dak yet. They didn't pay Dak.
No, but what they're looking to pay him, what they're projected to pay. I mean, it's looking at crazy. And looking at the way this team played without Dak just shows you how much they rely on him. And if you rely on a QB to that point, where I mean Ezekiel Elliott, who's supposed to be like a dominant like running back, just couldn't do shit without Dak Prescott. That just shows you that this team it just needs to go rebuild mode. I mean, this team. I mean, Zeke leads the NFL in fumble. He just does not look good without him. And the fact that their cap space is just blown. I mean, they have terrible cap space situation. They're not looking good without Dak. And I mean, this is a team that you're better off with the competition in your conference. You're better off just doing a full rebuild.
I wouldn't say full rebuild. I think a restructure because I mean, you look at their offense. They do have Dak Prescott. They do have Ezekiel Elliott. As much as a cap hold he's still a great running back when he does have a quarterback, and he is very quarterback dependent. But he's still a top running back when he has a quarterback. Let's not forget that. And then you also look at Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, these great receivers that they have. They have truly an amazing offense when everyone's healthy. But I think the real problem, as we all know, is the defense. I think. Of course, you have to clear up room so that you can have a defense, but I think you need to trade away DeMarcus Lawrence, get more on that defensive end because they are really, truly lacking hard on the defensive end. And I think they have Super Bowl talent on their offense if they keep on having their offense together, but they really just need to focus on having a defense and trading for a defense, drafting a defense, use all your draft capital like the Panthers did in 2019 to draft a defense. Maybe that's your solution, but I do think that the Cowboys, they can't really rebuild as long as Jerry Jones is their owner, until he sells the team and relieves himself of the general manager job. They're not going to win anything. They're not going to rebuild, and they're not going to do anything properly. So there's really nothing they can do until Jerry Jones is gone.
Oh, Ben, before say that Jerry Jones just doesn't do anything, what would you do? Say if you're the Cowboys and if you were to restructure your system, you would want to rebuild. You have a bloated you have an just absolutely terrible salary cap. You can't sign defensive players. What would you do if you were in that situation? You're saying restructure. restructure that bad of a
I would be
situation.
using all of my draft capital on that defense. I think that defense is way too treacherous. Also, I'm firing Mike McCarthy. He's terrible. He's one of the worst coaches there is in the NFL. We talk about Adam Gase a lot, but let's go ahead and put Mike McCarthy in that situation. I mean, he was calling a fake punt pass on his own 25-yard line against the football team. I mean, he's not a competent coach. I don't know why. I mean, it's a classic Jerry Jones hire to hire him, but I think that this team needs to move on from him, use their draft capital on defense, trade Lawrence because his cap that he puts on the team is a lot. And then maybe if you need to get more cap room to sign players, trade Ezekiel Elliott because of the cap room the cap hold that he has, and he's proven that he's a pure receiving back without Dak Prescott, and he relies on a great quarterback. But I don't know. There's a lot that needs to happen to this Cowboys team to compete. But the next thing I do want to talk about is who are your top 5 teams in the NFL, Arjun?
All right. Number 5. We'll start with number 5. I've got the Buffalo Bills, and I'm going to put them above the Packers, who we usually have around here, because the Packers did just lose. And I mean, Josh Allen has really been stepping it up. He and Stephon Diggs have been playing really well. They're a team that you wouldn't expect. They're 7-3. They're doing really well. Number 4, I've got the LA Rams. The Rams defense is looking better than ever. I mean, Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald are looking amazing, and their offense is looking solid. Jared Goff is doing all right. And the thing about that is that they beat the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers, I don't think they've been struggling to a point where they haven't been like having insane struggles, but they're still a great team, and they beat an offensive powerhouse team, the Seattle Seahawks. Now, number 3, I've got the Saints. The Saints have a terrific defense. Their defense has been one of the best defenses like in the NFL the last 3 games. And then, I mean, they have a healthy offensive team other than Drew Brees. And you might unlock the potential of Michael Thomas not running a slant. And then number two, I've got the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs, Mahomes and Kelsey came in clutch against that game, but they almost lost to the Oakland Raiders, they're a great offensive team, but I have to put them number 2 because of the way they played, the way they almost fumbled the bag that game. Number 1, I got to put the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're undefeated. They're undefeated, and you might as well put them at that top spot. Maybe they may not be maybe if you put them against the Chiefs would probably beat them, but you got to put them there after what happened against.
Okay. So my top 5. Before I criticize anything about yours, I'll just get mine out of the way. And I think that the 5th spot either goes to the Colts or the Rams. I'm not really sold on either team being that complete 5th spot. You could really give it to either side. I mean, the Colts had a really impressive comeback win against the Packers. They showed a lot of potential. Nyheim Hines, Phillip Rivers showing some signs of his old self, which is what this team needs with how great of a defense they truly do have. And then the Rams, of course, Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, and then the rest of that defense is amazing. And then you have that offense has been stepping up as of recently. Jared Goff had a really impressive game against the Bucs, actually. But I think that those two can be interchanged. And then at number 4, I think it's the Packers. I think my top 4 is really just sold where it is. At 4, I have the Packers. 3, I have the Saints. I don't have to explain either of those. You know why. And then at 2, I have the Steelers. And at 1, I have the Chiefs. I know a lot of people are putting the Steelers at number 1 because they are undefeated. And it's like, oh, you can't blame them. They've won 10 games. They haven't lost anything. You can't blame them for that. But I also can't blame the Chiefs for their one loss this season against the Raiders. I think it was they just lost a game. Of course, you can't think that they're worse than the Raiders. That's ridiculous. You have the best quarterback in football. You have the best tight end in football. You have a top 5 receiver in football. You have an amazing defense. You have an amazing offensive line. You just have an amazing team, and I don't think there's a team that matches their talent alongside the fact that they have a great coach and great chemistry with that team. You have the MVP frontrunner. You have a great defense. You have a great receiver core, and you have a team that when you're looking in the future, when you're looking at the playoffs, a team that is coming off a Super Bowl win last year and isn't showing any signs of fatigue. So I think that I have to put them above the Steelers also because when you look at the Steelers, you look at their defense. You don't look at their offense at all. People have been putting Big Ben in the conversation for a top 5 quarterback or even a top 10 quarterback, and I think that's ridiculous. I mean, the guy can't throw more than 15 yards downfield, and he doesn't, and he shows that he doesn't. He has a great receiver core, but he doesn't use it, and they really don't use James Conner the way I would like, and I think that I have to put the Chiefs above them because their defense really, the Steelers defense can't do everything for them down the stretch. And I think the Chiefs are the best team in the NFL.
Ben, the thing is that you got to give Ben Roethlisberger credit where credit's due because this guy just came back after 2 years. He fought a legal case. I don't know what happened with that, but I mean, this guy came back and he's looking like a top 10 quarterback in the league. So you have to give credit where credit's due. How is he not? I mean, he's putting up good numbers. He's doing a good job. He's leading his team. You can't see that the defense has shouldered their. I mean, they've carried their load. But at some point, you have to give offense the credit they deserve. Ben Roethlisberger has utilized his receivers, maybe not in the best way, but it's not like he's been absolutely terrible with their team to a point where if they didn't have the same defense, they would be like a 5-5 team. They're a team where you have to give Ben Roethlisberger the credit where credit's due. And that's why I have him above the Chiefs because, I mean, as much slander as you want to give his throwing ability, you have to give. I mean, they have James Conner as one hell of a back, but I mean, if you put Ben, the Chiefs solely relied on Mahomes being Mahomes in that last. I mean, he got like
and as they should,
they had to rely on him. They had to rely on him.
You can't blame a team for relying on the reigning Super Bowl MVP, who's supposed to be the MVP this year, who has won some sort of MVP every year of his career. Of course, they can rely on him with the receiver core he has, with the tight end he has, with the offensive line he has. Damn, rely on Patrick Mahomes as much as you want because it's Patrick Mahomes, and I have all my confidence in Patrick Mahomes, and I think they are, despite their one loss compared to the Steelers' 0, I don't think there's a gap there because I think the Chiefs are by far the most talented team in the NFL. But the next thing I do want to talk about is it time to bench Carson Wentz? Arjun, what do you think?
All right, Carson Wentz, before we get into this argument, I think Carson Wentz is a terrible QB. He's not by any means a good starting QB. He's just, I mean, his numbers are absolutely terrible. So before I get into this argument, I know, Ben, I'm going to enrage you with what I'm about to say. But when Doug Peterson says that Jalen Hurts, the second-round drafted QB, is not ready, he is not ready for the NFL, after what Carson Wentz has done to this team, you still have the ability to tell the press, to tell the world that Jalen Hurts is just not ready for the NFL. That tells you all you need to know. I mean, if you actually look in depth on how Jalen Hurts plays, he relies on creativity, he relies on play action passes, creative QB runs. You know that takes creativity. Do the Eagles have any creativity in their system? No. They have no creativity whatsoever. And when Doug Peterson tells me that Jalen Hurts is going to make this 4-6 team, which isn't terrible, even worse, then I believe him just because of what Wentz is doing to this team.
No. Okay, Doug Peterson. Okay, we can't completely trust Doug Peterson. Of course, he has a quarterback starting that he's not going to bench. So why would he tell the press that he's ready to bench his backup? Why would he say that? That makes no sense if he wasn't going to bench him already. And of course, you never want to bench a guy mid-season that's been starting all season. But when it really comes down to it, for the future of the team, I mean, what's it going to do to you? I mean, you're in the worst division in the league by far. Historically, I think this might be the worst division of all time for this season. And you have 4 wins. You're tied, or you're 1 game behind the football team. And you have the worst quarterback you have probably the worst starting quarterback in the league. He's leading the league in interceptions. He's the 4th lowest in completion percentage. According to Pro Football Focus, he has their 31st worst. Well, he is the 31st ranked offensive grade and the 33rd ranked passer grade. And then when it comes to NFL passer rating, he's 37th in the league of quarterbacks who have started this year. And that's literally not starting. Like, there's backup quarterbacks who have played better than him this season, and there's a lot of them. I think that you have to bench Carson Wentz because he is a big reason that you're losing. I mean, Eagles fans have been saying it for years and years and years and years. Ever since that year that he was in MVP contention, all he needs is more weapons, and then he'll be elite. And then at that point, he'll be elite. He needs an offensive line. He needs more receivers. He has Travis Fulgham this year. I mean, like, he's a great receiver. He's not like top 5, top 15. He's not up there, but he's a great receiver. You have Alshon Jeffries. He's not a terrible receiver. He's an average receiver. And then, I mean, like, that receiver core, it's not terrible. He has an offensive line that's pretty bad, but like, even if your offensive line is bad and you have toddlers throw as your receivers, throwing the numbers that he has so far this season have just been horrendous.
No, I'm agreeing with you on the fact that Carson Wentz, there's a point where you have given him the weapons that he does kind of deserve, but I mean, they're still four. It's not a Jet situation. It's not the situation where this is just like you're got to throw away this season. They're still 4-6, and they still have hope of being the
It's
best in
not
the
throwing away
conference,
the season to start
overtaking.
a quarterback
It
that could
is
probably.
throwing away the
I
season
think
if you
no,
it
no,
is. I
no.
mean, if you put
Starting,
in
starting,
Jalen
starting
Hurts,
Jalen
a
Hurts.
second round quarterback, it is essentially throwing away the season. You're basically saying, you know what, just screw it. I'm going to throw in this guy, see what happens, which isn't the worst, but scenario. But I mean, with the position they're at, they're only one win behind the Washington football team. And I mean, they're in a
Is Carson
situation.
Wentz going to deliver you those wins? Or are you going to say, hey, this guy's probably in the ranks for the worst quarterback in the league? Let's see if our backup can be somewhat of not the worst quarterback in the league. Let's see if his creativity can win us a damn football game. But anyways, I do want to talk about something else. We are running short on time. We got our last thing we are going to talk about today, which is Deshaun Watson a top 5 quarterback in the NFL right now? Actually, I do want to start this one off. And obviously, I do think he's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I don't think there's really a debate there as of right now. As of how he's playing over his last 4 games, he's thrown for 16 touchdowns and he hasn't thrown an interception. We saw what he did against the Lions. They're no historically great defense. They're no great defense. But when it comes down to it, he still had an amazing game. And when you look at the weapons he's doing the most with the least. I mean, he's in the ranks of the guys like Aaron Rodgers and not Patrick Mahomes, but like Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. And his lead receivers are Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks. And last year he had DeAndre Hopkins, but they fucked him over with trading him. But when it really comes down to it, he's doing a lot. Like he's doing an elite level of stuff with literally nothing to throw to. He has no offensive line. That team has no defense. They have no running game, and they have no receivers that are of the top level like these guys like Kyler Murray have, like these guys like Drew Brees have. And that's why I think he's a top 5 quarterback.
Okay, yeah, I'm actually I'm with you in the fact that he's a top 5 quarterback. I wouldn't say he's a top 3 quarterback to that extent. I would say that my top. I mean, these aren't in order, but of course, there's Mahomes, there's Rodgers, Murray, and Wilson, and you can throw in Watson in there. I think Watson's a borderline. He's 5 right there. But it's at the point where I do agree with you. I mean, we all can talk about that DeAndre Hopkins trade. I think we all can agree that that was one of the worst trades in NFL history. That could be the worst trade in NFL history. But I mean, he has done all this with 0 weapons, and he's had 5 straight games without any turnovers. I mean, he's 6th in yards per game. He's 4th in completion percentage, 6th in interception percentage in a good way. But I think you can't go to the point where you're saying he's better than Mahomes, Rodgers, or either Murray or Wilson. But I think he is definitely a top
Okay,
5
okay.
quarterback.
I think it was disrespectful of you to say that Aaron Rodgers wasn't a top 3 quarterback. I'm pretty sure. Did you say you didn't say that
No,
Aaron
I
Rodgers?
said that he's a top 3
Okay, okay,
quarterback.
good. Yeah. I don't think he's top 3. I don't think he's better than Rodgers. I don't think he's better than Wilson. I do think he's better than Kyler Murray. The thing is, I mean, you might think it's a little ridiculous because I know you are a big Kyler Murray guy, but when you look at what they've done this year, again, saying this again, a far worse offensive line, far worse receiver core, far worse run game, and far worse defense. Deshaun Watson has had a higher completion percentage, more passing yards per game, higher touchdown percentage, lower interception percentage, better QBR, better passer rating, more total yards, more total touchdowns, less total interceptions, and more yards per attempt. The only things that Kyler Murray beat out Deshaun Watson in are running touchdowns and running yards per game. And I think that you have to give that spot, the 4 spot, in my opinion, to Deshaun Watson because of what he's doing is better than what Kyler Murray is doing, and he's doing it with a lot less.
Okay, Ben, I'm gonna beg a quick question for you. If you were to put Deshaun Watson on the Arizona Cardinals team, you swapped him and Kyler Murray with the weapons that Kyler does have on the Cardinals. How well do you think that that Cardinals team would be doing with Watson?
Well, assuming that the systems fit together properly, because of course quarterbacks are adapted to the systems that they're in, but Deshaun Watson is adapted to the system with their new head coach, whoever they had brought in. I forgot who it is. I think that that team would be doing better right now. I mean, obviously Kyler Murray has gotten to know his guys, and he's gotten to play with them and with his system that he's run with the kind of Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson type play style that he does have. I do think that they would be a better team because they have a better quarterback, but I mean that's objectively just a bad argument in my opinion. I do think that he's a better quarterback because of what he's doing on his team that is by far worse than the Cardinals without him. But I do think that maybe the Cardinals would be a better team with Kyler Murray because they've been playing with Kyler Murray.
Okay, yeah, I'm definitely agree that I think we can come to a conclusion that Deshaun Watson is a top 5 quarterback in the
Yeah.
league. No, I don't want to like that's for right now because in terms of skill wise, maybe I mean you could obviously say Josh Allen might be better, but then again, if you look at no,
No,
yeah, skill
no,
wise, you could go with that.
no.
No, I'm not saying that I would, but you could go on that basis. There is a debate on it. There
Yeah, if
is a
you're
debate
fucking
stats
stupid, you
wise.
could go on that basis.
I mean, no. Okay, if you have all those guys there, you could say that. I mean, obviously Watson is underrated, but there's Mahomes, Rogers, Murray, and Wilson. Not in or I mean, they're all in that area. But I think that if you give Watson, if you give him a better O line, if you get him better weapons, I mean, he has David Johnson. It's not a lot you can do with the old David Johnson. He's not what he used to be. That's for sure. But I remember Deshaun Watson was a highly hyped quarterback. But I really do think that if you give him a good team, I mean, this guy could potentially lead you to Super Bowl. This is you never know. I mean,
Yeah,
he
I mean,
could
like, if and
MVP play.
just to say what my final things were to say, I think we generally agree on this. Besides Murray and Deshaun Watson, but I do think if this team had a couple more wins, hell, I mean, they're on the right trajectory right now. They fired Bill O'Brien. If they make it near the playoffs, I mean, why isn't this guy in and MVP contention? My bad. I think if this team had a couple more wins, he would definitely be in the debate for the MVP. But of course, a team with 3 wins, you can't be calling that guy an MVP candidate just because of the wins. But anyways, I think that'll be it for us today. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you're still watching, and go ahead. The merch is in the bio, and all the times of all the topics are in the bio as well. And our Instagram is Half Court Heave Podcast, just that with no spaces, no nothing. But anyways, that's it for us today, and see you guys later.
Signing off.